Good morning, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and I'm going to show you a few clips, actually most of our schooling with Q this morning. She has really begun to develop working gaits absolutely beautifully. And really today, we saw her come to a level that we have not seen before. Notice that she comes out of the blocks there just all ready to step up into a really nice working walk. Notice how soft she is in the bridle. Remember, this horse was a horse that had been broken in the neck, that is overflexed in the third or fourth vertebrae there in her neck when we got her. And that is a very hard thing to overcome, especially with all the other difficulties that this horse has had health-wise. But we feel like we're on the other side of most of them now, and we're seeing improvements like we've never seen. You see here how she's lifting up, how she's not curling behind the bridle. So when you see a horse curl up behind the bridle, they really, as soon as they curl, they go onto the forehand, which is, of course, what we see, and of course, what's wrong with roll cur and these kind of things where people are pulling the horses' necks over like that. They create all this activity which fools people who don't know what they're looking at. But when you see the back ends basically stop moving when you pull a horse over like that, and it basically pulls them over onto the forehand. Very few of the horses we see in dressage today actually stay lowered and actually lift off the ground. Most of them are just lifting their legs or throwing their legs, front legs out forward. But we couldn't be happier with this, and that's what throughness means, that energy keeps flowing through. You'll notice with Karen today, she doesn't have to do a lot of tapping with the whip or using her leg a great deal, because the horse has started to generate real impulsion, which means energy that just flows through the horse. And of course, if you break the horse over the neck, that energy flow stops where the neck is broken, or if the back can't lift, it just stops right there. So that can only happen when the horse's back is lifting. And of course, that can only happen when the back is strong enough. But for her to stay in this lovely working walk, once again, not curling behind the bridle, you can see even in the walk there, she mostly looks lifted there at the withers. We see her lifting up in a nice regular 4-beat walk. She's able to maintain that as we go into shoulder in here. We can actually begin to call this a shoulder in, because you can see there that she's actually beginning to bend in her middle, and that's when we call it a shoulder in. If the horse isn't bending under your seat, it's a leg yield, because the horse is not really bent. Good, and you could see there, just towards the end of that her back legs started to get a little slow in the movement. They weren't stepping up, so Karen feels a little like she just has to come back and refresh her. Now, most people today, when you see them riding, when they feel the horse is beginning to lack energy, the first thing they do is start holding the horse up in the air and whipping it more, trying to make it more active. And of course, that's why we see so much tension in horses today. Remember that when a muscle is tight, there's not much blood flowing to it. So in order to refresh the horse, in other words, bring the strength back to the muscles, we have to let the blood flow, and that's what happens when we let the horse stretch out. Now, once horses can maintain relaxation through all their gaits and keep that impulsive flow, they're able to generate that. So that tells you how far along you are in your training. But as soon as you feel that flow beginning to stop, you have to get it going again. You got to get the water flowing again before you can get anywhere. And you see, after that little bit of refreshing into the stretch, she came back up into a nicer walk again. And again, here in this direction, we can see she's starting to bend a little bit, so we can start to call this a shoulder in. And notice how light her inside rein is. Karen keeps giving that inside rein as she's moving the horse into that outside rein. Like that, and she stays up very beautifully. You'll also notice with this horse that if you guys remember what she looked like, she always looked like a train. She's a very long back horse, and but what we see now through the strength, as she begins to lift her back, then they can shorten. It's only when they can lift their back and keep it lifted that they can begin to shorten their base of support. That is, the hind legs come closer to the front end and stay there. And beautifully, she goes into a trot here. And you can see how when she wants to curl over again just a little bit, Karen puts her into a shoulder in to bring her pole back up. Very nicely done. And of course, same thing here. When Karen feels that the horse is beginning to lose strength, instead of trying to force the strength, she lets the horse come back into a stretch and lets it refresh its muscles. Now notice that as soon as she goes back into the stretch, we see the hocks begin to move more actively again, making a round circle again. So when you see that beginning to stop, that's when we go to a stretch, because we feel we're getting a little too stiff-legged, which means she can't maintain it. Dressage is strength training. You have to understand that, just like strength training for a human being. You know, if you can lift 500 pounds, you can't lift it all day long. You have to, you know, your muscles are going to tire out, and you're not going to be able to keep performing at the same level. Horses are the same way. But people, of course, have this idea that horses are these big, strong animals, and they could do anything we want if they would just do it for us. You know, well, that's just not true at all. Just like any athlete, the muscles get tired, and then you're done. And that's when you have to stop. If you can't refresh them in the stretch, it's time to stop for the day. How beautifully she made that canter transition. You notice how nice and balanced her canter is starting to be, really staying up. A beautiful working canter today. Notice that she's staying up through the withers, like that. You'll see her lifting herself. And of course, once the horse can canter and really canter well, and part of this horse coming back, we did a lot of canter work with her because she naturally engages better in the canter than she does in trot. Some do, some do not. So we always have to, as trainers, evaluate where does the horse work best? Where can we get the most muscle engagement? And if that's the canter, then we do more of the canter. But there are some horses that simply can't connect in the canter, and it's simply a waste of time. It just makes them go lame if you do a lot of canter. Now watch how cleanly she comes through on this flying change here this time. Right there, absolutely beautiful, right off Karen's leg. And right back to a beautiful balanced canter here. Does a little shoulder in here, same thing, getting it to lift. Notice how nicely she stays, and actually she lifts a little more. Notice the withers actually came up a little bit in the shoulder in. Remember, that's what shoulder in is for. It's not because we think it's pretty to go sideways. It's how we engage the horse correctly through its inside hind leg. That can only happen if the back is lifting. We see people all the time forcing horses into shoulder ins, then their backs are down. So when shoulder in, when any lateral work is used correctly, it's used to engage that individual inside hind leg one at a time. That's why we do both sides. It takes a long time for the horse to get strong enough to be able to do that in a straight line. That's why we have to strengthen both sides, and it's only later we begin to go in straight lines. And watch the change here. You'll see she's a little bit late behind there, but she still came through quite nicely, so we were happy with that for today. That used to be her very, very difficult side, and came back to a good working canter after that as well. And of course, after that, we reward her by just coming back to the stretch. Once again, refreshing those muscles. Now notice with her that when we go into the stretch that she now, when it used to be that every time you stretched her, she just immediately came behind the bridle. But now she's beginning to keep her face out in front of the vertical slightly. And we just do a little bit of work on some lengthening of the stride here once we get her up and balanced again. So you can see at this point, she's starting to get a little tired, so Karen has to work a little harder to get it, but she's still able to bring it back. Able to bring her back underneath herself again. Once again, notice how Karen's working with that inside rein to be sure that the horse is light on the inside rein and moving into the outside rein. She uses her back there. And once again, with horses that have been broken over the neck, we have to bring them up. We can never take contact back with your hands because the horse is just going to break its neck. So she was able to correct that quite nicely and get a better trot there and get her to come back up underneath her again. So she's gotten a little too flat. See how she wants to dip down. So she's feeling her a little tired, so she's coming back to the stretch. We don't ask her to keep that. So as we progress in the training on a session, as we feel the horse getting tired, then we're going to come back to the stretches a little sooner. Once again, to refresh the muscles till we feel like that it's becoming too difficult, and then we're going to stop. So we always got to go a little bit further each day, but we always have to keep listening to the horse. What's it telling us? Now notice also with her how nice her back is starting to look behind the saddle there. This horse always had a dip behind the saddle. Getting her to really engage through that top line was so difficult. Many of you will remember that we had a lot of health problems with this horse. But happily, they all seem to be working out. All things in time, as they say. If you're willing to put the time in. Really nice trot there. How nicely she's lifting Karen in the saddle. Really nice. You can see she wants to curl just a little bit. That's why Karen is lifting her hands up there a little bit. Instead of taking any more by her back, she just brings her up a little bit. Get that nose back out like that. That's what we want to maintain. Beautiful, like that. So this is only just now becoming possible with this horse. But once you can really get that complete connection, and the energy really beginning to move through the horse correctly, in other words, from the back all the way to the front, where you feel that energy coming through you to the reins, then everything starts to happen very easily. Really nice shoulder in there in that. Notice as she really is taking that big step underneath her body and staying there. Once again, notice how much more closed up this horse is from the back to the front. She's shortened her stride because she can lift her back and bring her back end closer to her front end. You see how she took a little contact there and she wanted to tip a little bit. And that's just that old thing of wanting to break at the third vertebrae that we're constantly fighting. But this is getting so much better all the time now. But when we feel it's starting to happen too much, then we know it's just about time to give her a break. Nice, again, that shoulder in. See how she wants to curl a little bit right there? Karen's trying to do a little bit of a half pass, but you see the result is she wants to curl over too much, so we have to just get her moving forward again. So that's a work in progress. So we're just beginning to be able to ask her to step in the direction of the bend. Once again, that's the difference between a half pass and a shoulder in. In the half pass, we move in the direction of the bend. Much more difficult. Really good working trot right there. Look how even the diagonal pairs are coming through, and what a good rhythm. Good. Now she comes to a nice lengthening of stride here, starting to come through a little better. Nice there. You can see how delicately Karen's working there to keep her pole up and to keep her from bending over. Really nice there. So now at the end, as always, we're going to come back to a stretch. So you can see that we were having to do stretches more often. She was having a little more trouble trying to overbend a little bit. So then we know that that's it for the day. We've done everything we could. This was really one of the best she's ever gone, and we're hoping it will just continue to improve. But we want to come back and once again finish, as always, in a stretch, letting the horse refresh all the blood back through those muscles. Always remembering that we build most of our muscles in the stretch, and then we bring them up and use those muscles. For the finish, Karen brings her up one more time. And beautiful transition back to walk, and of course back into a stretch. So we were very happy. We couldn't be happier, actually, with the way this horse is starting to develop. This is Will Faerber working with Karen Lashba and our horse Q. I hope you guys enjoyed that. She's such a wonderful horse, and we are so happy to see her turning this corner and really turning into something quite special. Have a wonderful day.